Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of the witnesses who are going to be testifying today on conflict and religious persecution in Nigeria. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation we'll have with Ambassador Pratt and Deputy Assistant Secretary McGee, as this committee is long overdue to hold a hearing with Trump administration officials. The African continent continues to be both increasingly important and increasingly overlooked. The continent is the youngest in the world, and in Nigeria alone, 70% of the population is under 35, and 40% is under 15. So it represents the future generations who will continue to lead and solve the world's problems. Nigeria has a unique position as a bellwether, as Africa's largest economy, most populous nation, and a significant actor in the region and on the world stage. And meanwhile, Nigeria is facing its own challenges, like rising insecurity, shrinking freedom of expression, and a struggling economy. So let's talk about the very real conflict and violence happening in Nigeria. Nigeria is facing multiple different security challenges in various parts of the country, including violent extremist groups in the northeast, criminal banditry in the northwest, and across the country, farmer-herder conflict in the Middle Belt, and other intercommunal violence in central and northern regions. Several factors are driving these conflicts. Yes, ethnicity and religion play a role in some cases, but other dynamics like poor governance, resource competition, climate change, and population pressures are important drivers that need to be addressed. I appreciate the chairman's passion on this and his long work on Nigeria. I think it's a distortion to say that what we're trying to say is that there's nothing to see here. In fact, there is something to see here. There is very real conflict and violence that we need to address. I've been working on addressing conflict in Nigeria since 2013, 2014, when I was part of the counter Boko Haram strategy at the State Department. The violence impacting both Christian and Muslim communities is real, and the Nigerian government can and should do more to address it. I was horrified to learn of the killing of 2 people and the kidnapping of the pastor and a worshiper at a church in Kwara State. And this came only a few days after, as the chairman mentioned, criminal bandits kidnapped 25 girls in Kebbi State. But it is counterproductive to adopt oversimplistic narratives about the multiple complex overlapping security challenges and violence across the country. The victims in the Kebbi State kidnapping were all Muslim girls. So violence affects everyone, and false narratives perpetuate harmful stereotypes and motivate tensions and violence based on religious identity. Distorting what's happening into a solely religious narrative erases the real drivers of violence and makes it harder to implement effective solutions. And it can fuel violence against the very groups the Trump administration claims it wants to protect. That's why I'm alarmed by President Trump's rhetoric about this violence and threats to go into Nigeria, guns a-blazing, and to wipe out terrorists. We are already receiving reports of increased tensions between Christian and Muslim populations following this rhetoric. President Trump's threat is reckless, and any unilateral military action in Nigeria would be illegal. Congress has not authorized force in Nigeria to protect Christians, and any action without Nigeria's consent violates international law. We also know that a military-first response won't actually address the violence and will do very little to protect Christian communities. As I said, I worked on Nigeria policy since I was at the State Department in 2014, so I know firsthand these security challenges are multifaceted, and they require a holistic approach. A military-led approach risks more civilian casualties and impunity, which will only fuel violent extremism more. So we need to use more tools from our foreign policy toolbox if we're serious about helping Nigeria protect its citizens. That means we need to leverage diplomacy and engage with Nigeria on how we can help support their response while pushing for important reforms within Nigeria's institutions. We also need to utilize foreign assistance to fund programs to help prevent violence and address conflict drivers. But the Trump administration so far has hobbled these tools. On the diplomatic front, while I'm glad to see Ambassador Pratt will be here representing the African Affairs Bureau, we still have yet to see even a nomination for an Assistant Secretary for Africa. And we don't have a Senior Director for Africa at the NSC either. There are several emergent conflicts in Africa, including in Nigeria, but also in Sudan, DRC, and across the Sahel and in Ethiopia that demand high-level, consistent, and substantive engagement. Occasional attention from the president, while most of the time welcome, won't be enough to see lasting results on all of these different crises. And on the development front, President Trump's dismantling of USAID and cuts of hundreds of millions of dollars worth foreign assistance in Nigeria is worsening the violence. For years, the United States has supported Nigerian institutions, civil society, faith-based leaders, and researchers to address the conflict, violence, and religious freedom challenges. These programs proactively prevented and directly addressed the violence this administration is now concerned about. For example, a recent article in DevEx highlighted a program that Secretary Rubio terminated, which has left a void in communities that suffer violence. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a DevEx article titled "The Cuts That Bleed: What Happens When Peace Programs Go Dark." Thank you. This article focuses on a former program implemented by Search for Common Ground, a peace-building organization that provided critical early warning in communities in Yelwata, a region in Nigeria's Middle Belt, where conflict and violence have erupted between Muslim herders and Christian farmers. This early warning program was responsible for fewer violent incidences before Secretary Rubio terminated it. In June, this same community was left in a lurch without this extra early warning support when an attack happened in Makurdi. Nearly 200 people were killed, hundreds burned alive in their homes and market stalls torched, and almost 4,000 people fled. And this is just one example where the United States has abandoned communities with no explanation. I have another article, this time from the LA Times by former USAID Foreign Service Officer Daniel Morris, that details another program that was helping prevent violence, but was discontinued. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an LA Times article titled "Trump Cuts Nigeria's Aid Back in March, Now He Wonders Why It's So Violent." Thank you. This article discusses a program called the Community Initiatives to Promote Peace that operated in northern Nigeria. It trained community elders, including religious and tribal leaders, in conflict resolution, and the results were impressive. After giving one group training and making another one a control group for 6 months, each group was asked if their communities experienced violence. Here's what the article says. Only 10% of people in communities that received negotiation training and dialogue meetings said yes, compared to 41% of people in communities that hadn't. The Nigerians in the treatment group reported feeling more secure, more likely to walk around their communities, and less likely to avoid certain areas than those in the control group. We don't always see these kinds of results. So the fact that we were and the administration eliminated this program is incredibly short-sighted and counterproductive given their apparent interest in this issue. So if we want the United States to help prevent and address conflict in Nigeria, we can't pull back and eliminate our tools like President Trump has done. I urge the administration to reverse these decisions, nominate people at senior levels to work on Africa issues, and commit to working on this seriously, not just through a few Truth Social posts. So I look forward to hearing the testimony of Ambassador Pratt and Deputy Assistant Secretary McGee on what the State Department is planning to do to address the violence in Nigeria and how it plans to partner with Nigeria on doing so. And lastly, while I'm glad we have our witnesses here to discuss Nigeria today, I would be remiss to not also raise Sudan, since this is our first time with the State Department witnesses in front of this subcommittee this Congress, and we still have not had a budget hearing. The situation in Sudan is horrific. And while I'm glad to see this war finally getting high-level attention from President Trump, I look forward to hearing from Ambassador Pratt about what the department's plan is to both make a deal that brings a lasting end to the war in Sudan and invest in a real peace process for the Sudanese people. Thank you. I yield back.